Hello, beautiful souls. You're at the Indigo Rose Lounge. This is your host, Alyce Dylan, and I'm circling back round to imagination. I think it's something that it's really important that we understand. I'm sure a lot of us heard when we were growing up, when we talked about, Granny says. Meanwhile, she's no longer embodied, and the adults said to us, oh, it's your imagination. Or there's a funny man in the corner. Oh, that's your imagination. Or, oh, mummy, don't go out today. I really feel like you shouldn't. Oh, that's your imagination. And meanwhile, mummy got a flat tire or something. Whatever it is, we've been brainwashed a little bit about imagination. That your imagination is somehow a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, it's the most productive element of the rational mind that there is. Everything is imagination. I covered this in an earlier podcast. I won't go through it all again, but the images that we receive through our eyes, the sounds we receive through our ears, all of these elements are translated through our imagination into actionable intelligence. They don't mean anything on their own, just like data doesn't truly mean anything in computer terms until it's processed into some kind of intelligence or some kind of intelligent output. And that all happens in our imaginations. All of us. 5 sense, 6 sense, indigo, spiritually perceptive, all of us. We use our imaginations to process information. And that's all the indigos are doing. We're just receiving another stream of information that the 5 sense don't have access to. Not yet. I mean, they could tomorrow. So nothing deficient about them. They could go through an extraordinary experience tomorrow, or take up meditation, or take up daily prayer and spiritual practice, whatever. There's so many roads to this. But once people take up a spiritual practice or meditation or Reiki, Reiki, I had a lot of my students that were very 5 sense before they came to classes, did a class, ended up on the other end as a 6 sense spiritually perceptive person. So here we have this additional stream of information that we're receiving from our spirit selves, and we are also translating that into our imagination, or we are also translating that through our imagination. The imagination receives the information and uses one or another sense to help us make that intelligible. And that's where all the clairs come in. The clairs are a response to the imagination processing information. So clairvoyance is that we see the information. Clairaudience is we hear it. Clairnascience is we smell it. Clairsentience is we know it. So a lot of different routes or mechanisms to process incoming information into some kind of actionable intelligence or knowing. All right. So your imagination was never a bad thing. Everybody's imagination processes information. That's how it works. You just have an additional stream of information, and people can doubt that. You can doubt it, because it's usually about stuff that other people can't see, touch, hear, smell, or experience in any other way. All right, like empathy. You look at Jane sitting over there. Jane doesn't look like she's sad. She's got a smile on. But you as an empath sitting over here can feel that Jane is sad. You see? But you're translating that through your imagination. So, dears, you were imagining all of it. But so are we all, imagining everything, every minute of every day. Does that put it into better perspective? What we can't imagine, though, is things that we have absolutely no experience of. So, if you've never had an experience of a bumblepick, if you have no idea what a bumblepick is, never seen one, if I say the word, your imagination is going to go blank, because it's like, I do not compute, I do not know what that is. So in that sense, can you see how our spirit selves, beings in the next world, spiritually higher beings, they could all be sending us all sorts of information. And if we don't have the capacity to process that, If our imagination lacks the grid to translate that information, we can receive it, but we're not translating it. One of the symptoms I often find with that is people who receive information but aren't quite tuned frequency-wise. If you're sitting in a little bit down, not so good, not so happy space, and your supporters in the next world are downloading to you information on a subject you've asked about, they're always going to be doing that at a higher frequency. So they're going to be doing that in a loving, nurturing, jolly way. And if you're sitting over here in glum or gloom, then that to you is just going to be like white noise. It's just like, I'm getting something, but ish, it's annoying. Yeah, you've got to raise your frequency up to at least contented, relaxed, peaceful, somewhere in that zone to even receive the information accurately. And even then, the information you receive might be so far out of your experience that you're unable to translate it. I often wonder how people initially came up with the idea, and it's a genuine question, I'm not being facetious, how people who say they have chats with aliens, how they initially came up with the idea that they were chatting with aliens. I've never, in all my clairvoyant years, in all my years of traveling around and doing spiritual adventuring, I've never had an experience with or encountered an alien being. All the beings I talk to are either just outside of this human experience or they are a frequency level or two above that. I've had some amazing interactions with what some people I think would call angels, angelic beings, concourse members, whatever your word for them is. Certainly very highly evolved spirits. And I understand why people would say they look like angels, because they're so shiny that it's like they're surrounded by light. And that does look a bit like wings. So I can imagine why people would think of them as angels with wings. So, I've experienced some of those, but I've never had a chat in all my years to a almond-eyed, other off-worlder. I just haven't. I'm not saying they're not out there, but I don't know why the person who first, or the people, no, I know how the people, I don't know how the first person imagined that they were having an experience with an alien intelligence. I'm not quite sure how you get there. Once you've been told that all the information you receive, so if you're taught to meditate, for example, if you're taught to connect to your spirit self, and you're told while you're doing that all of the intelligence that you receive at that space will be coming from alien intelligences, then you've got a belief system now that forms a grid over your imagination. And so you will believe that all the information you receive is coming from alien intelligences. And that will be your experience. It will be. Because our beliefs place a grid over our imagination. And that becomes the grid through which we interpret all the information we receive. It's also, if you have a young person or maybe a person who's a part of a church, certain kind of church group, and they are either taught or they see through the practice of others, people receiving information, and those people say that God's talking to them. Then if they receive information, they believe God's talking to them. I think it's interesting that people form the grids and the beliefs, and then everything is translated through that grid. I'm not saying they aren't, and please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anybody's not being authentic. And if people are having huge long raps with alien intelligence, then all power to them. I don't see how that could have come about unless the initial person was a great big Douglas Adams fan and they just assumed when they first heard their first communication or first received their first download, that had to be coming from alien intelligence, because somehow they'd missed the memo that the next world was within this world. Just think about that for a moment, okay? So here I am. I'm a radio station or a receiver of information, and I open up to receiving information, right? Turning on the radio beam now, receiving information. And what information do I receive? Well, surely the first port of call for where this information is coming from is the world that's just beyond the veil, just a higher level of frequency. So we know that when we leave this human experience, our consciousness goes up to our spirit selves. Spirit selves is already a higher level frequency outside of this physical space and time reality. And so we just transition back to our higher frequency selves. And so I put up my receiver beacon, and I'm now going to receive information, receive intelligence or information of any kind from whatever's around me. And the first stream of information I receive is from other galaxies. Really? And I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm just saying I don't know how that's the first port of call. Not quite clear on that. So from my experience, all I can tell you is that if you put up your receiver and you're open to receiving what's logical, because we were given a logical brain for a reason. Doesn't matter that we have six senses. We were given a logical brain for a good reason. Probably the first stream of information that you're going to receive is from guides. Guides are souls that they either adopt you, just they like what you're on about, and they have a passion for what you're doing, and they come and guide your process. So they're a guide, really, in the purest term. So a guide, or it's going to be your line, your ancestral line. There are also others who hang around. They perhaps lost their own downline somewhere along the way, but they still have lessons to learn and things to do. And they see your antenna up, and they can pop along to have a conversation. Sticking up your antenna or being open to receiving means also believing. It's like that story about you can't see the fairies unless you believe in the fairies. Well, you know, you're not going to receive. If you don't believe in everything I've just said, if you don't believe that the next world is within this world, is separated by a veil, if you don't believe that, if you don't believe that you are truly a spiritual being having a human experience, if you don't have that belief system on your translation grid, on your imagination grid, then how are you going to receive intelligence and information from those in the next world or from your higher self? You know, that's obviously not going to be that successful. So there has to be a belief system overlying your imagination, which can both has the capacity not only to receive and has the willingness to receive. It has the openness to receiving, because if you believe also that there are scary things on that side of the veil, then you're going to block that off too. So remember, the imagination is crucial. It's crucial. It's the thing. It's the good thing. It's not only where all our dreams are born and created and maybe even downloaded and received, but it's also the space that we receive additional information. We receive it there, we translate it there, and then our mind pushes it to one of our senses that is willing to express it to us. So your imagination is precious, and it is the seat of your thought. It is where your thoughts translate from received information. But it's also, obviously, you have your own thoughts too, and it's the place of dreams. It is the place of creation. If we are indeed created in the image of our Creator, then we too are co-creators with life. And our imagination is vital, obviously, in that endeavor too. We are magnificent spiritual beings having this human experience. And your imagination was never a bad thing. And when they said to you, that you were imagining it. They weren't wrong, but it wasn't a bad thing because they were imagining absolutely everything too. You can see it in that context. You can see it that our imagination processes absolutely all the information we receive, whether it's through our eyes or through our ears. All of that information gets processed at the seat of our imagination. The imagination processes that into actionable intelligence. And so, therefore, too, your sixth sense or your clair or your downloaded information from your spirit self is also going to come through the same pathway, will go through the seat of your imagination and will be translated into actionable intelligence. Imagination isn't a baddie, it's a very good thing, and it is our superpower as human beings. It is what separates us. Well, that and the rational faculty. But we get to create, we get to discover, we get to imagine. Imagine what's out there in a world of unlimited possibilities. We cannot possibly fathom everything that's out there. So, with that in mind, if you do ask a question of the fairies, make sure that you have the capacity to receive the answer. Be careful what you wish for. And if you're not receiving an answer to it, because they always do answer, they always do. You ask a question, they will always bring you the answer. Then the question needs to be, what am I resisting here? What am I resisting receiving? What information am I not prepared to receive, or do I not yet have the capacity to receive? And as always, the way to resolve all of those things is just to love. Always.